Well, we have the next John joining us, but his name is John Black. He's the president and CEO over at Aldebaran Resources. You're developing, exploring a project, copper gold project down in San Juan, Argentina. Put out some fantastic drill holes recently. 650 meters of 8% copper equivalent, within 1,000 meters of 0.6% copper equivalent. Fantastic results. Run us through how you did it.
Okay. Great.
Thanks so much, John.
Great, thanks. And thanks everybody for being here. Special thanks to Willem and Terrence and the team for putting this event together. This is a pretty interesting event for me, really. We often interact with funds that make investments into us as working, but it's unusual to see a fund make the bridge between the people that invest in the fund and those of us that the fund invests in. And I really like that concept. I think it's pretty powerful. We're here at the stand. For those of you who want to talk to us, we probably won't have a chance to talk to everybody today, but you can certainly contact us through Willem, and his team can provide more information. There's a lot of information on our website as well. At Aldebaran, we're a group of explorations that specializes in finding very large copper or copper gold deposits, drilling those out, showing their full-size potential, de-risking them through about a pre-feas, and then ideally selling them to a major mining company. That's the strategy that we have. And that's why I couldn't be more excited than the market that we're in right now. We're seeing copper prices pick up. It's hard for us to find these projects. But once we've found them, we also have to have timing in the market. And I think what we're entering into in the copper space right now, we've seen it from several of the speakers earlier today, that we're going to see an extreme shortage of copper, which means an increase in copper prices. And when that happens, the major copper miners switch from being conservative and focusing on returning dividends to shareholders and focus on growth. How can they get new copper produced? They no longer, for the most part, do very good exploration themselves, and they often find themselves in a situation where they don't have deposits to develop. And what our team tries to do is deliver that deposit to them when they're cashed up and hungry and looking. And I think we've got an outstanding one at the Altar project. We're switching gears to the Andes. We're in Argentina now, in the high Andes in central Argentina. This is a view of the project. We're a company that's listed on the TSX Venture, ticker symbol ALDE, so the appropriate disclaimers apply to us. And the real highlights of what we have as an opportunity in Aldebaran and the Altar project right now is we're advancing a project that's already one of the largest undeveloped copper deposits in the hands of a junior company. But while we started with it knowing it was a pretty good deposit to start with, we've made a very exciting new discovery that's about to dramatically increase the size of the deposit, and that's what we'll be revealing over the next year. We're also located in San Juan, Argentina, which is a real hotbed for copper exploration right now. It's probably one of the focal, most active points in the world right now for copper exploration. Just in the province, in the surrounding projects around us, there are over 65 drill rigs working this summer on drilling out several major copper deposits. This is largely because Argentina has been a country that has the right rocks, the same rocks that are on the other side of the border in Chile. So same potential for copper deposits, but due to fiscal policies over the last 50 years or so, they have not really encouraged investment, foreign investment at the scale sufficient to develop large mines. So there are a number of interesting projects sitting here, waiting to be developed. And with the new president, Malayan, he's actively making serious changes to the economy there, which will include making it attractive for major miners to come in. So we're seeing a flood of all the major copper miners, many of the gold miners, lithium miners, coming into Argentina right now and positioning themselves to be able to develop new projects, of which there are many in the country. So keep an eye on Argentina for investments of all types, commodities of all types going forward. We're also a team that is experienced at doing what we're doing. We'll touch on that in a little bit, which is a very important. I think we've seen several pick lists of things that people look at to determine what's a good company to invest into. One that I didn't particularly see on some of the pick lists earlier today is a history of success in the company. Oftentimes in our space, you'll see that discoveries are made by teams that have already discovered something. That could be because the teams are good. It also, what happens is when you have success in our space, you attract confident investors that will invest in you again, and you often get good looks at new projects as well. So there's a certain advantage to having already executed your business plan once and having success. It makes it easier to do it again going forward. I think I don't need to go as much detail as I planned on this on why copper. I think we've seen several very good points on some of the previous speakers on this. But the amount of copper that is necessary, when we talk about the green revolution and moving to a lower carbon future, a lot of the emphasis is on the batteries. We saw an excellent introductory speech today about that. But one of the fundamental metals that's important for any type of energy transition that we go through is copper. That's what moves the electricity around between everything. We've seen the growth in electric vehicles, a debate about whether that's tailing off or not. You can go into a lot of details on that. But I think it's important to focus, it's not just that. Renewable energy is consuming a tremendous amount of energy between solar and wind and all of the cabling and everything that's necessary to move it around. And we're seeing emergence of a notable increase in demand due to data centers and use of AI going forward as well. So don't focus simply on EVs. EVs need a lot more copper to do. We can debate on how quickly they'll be adapted, but it's much broader than that as we go forward. It's been touched on by previous speakers about how in all of history up until today, we've used the same amount of copper that we'll need in the next 20 to 25 years. And as an industry, that copper is there. I think Neil pointed out that it's not a problem about more deposits out there. It's really getting the deposits discovered and getting them financed to be developed, and particularly in the copper space. The average time to put a new copper mine into production, once it's drilled out and you know what's there, is about 16 or 17 years now. And so it's going to be hard for us to rapidly fill this gap. It's almost inevitable that the metal price will go up. And when that metal price goes up, what happens is the major miners then have a lot more cash. They can be a lot more generous. We heard it in several of the earlier talks today in the gold space as well. But they're also going to be pushed to grow. And when they grow, they can do it by developing projects they've discovered themselves. But increasingly, major mining companies don't dedicate as much time as they should to their own exploration efforts. And a group like ourselves effectively replaces the exploration component of a major mining company. My background is I'm an exploration geologist. I spent the first half of my career working for major miners like Rio Tinto, Western Mining, Kennecott, and then jumped over into the junior space and effectively do the same thing that I did as a major mining company, within a major mining company, but delivering that product to them to go forward. Supply gap that we've talked about quite a bit over on the right side with an inevitable gap. And this, we hear this over the decades commonly that there'll be gap, and I think Neil pointed out we often fill that gap and are pretty good about doing it. This one I think is a bit more extreme, and we're already noticing day by day right now what the copper price is doing moving up. And on the left side, this is a chart, it's from 1991 on the top down to today on the bottom, and it shows major discoveries in the copper space, and we can see how those discoveries are tailing off. It's becoming increasingly difficult to discover projects, and it's partly because the world is more explored right now. It's partly because it's more difficult to explore due to permitting or other geopolitical considerations. But the net effect is we're not making the discoveries that we need to make to fill that supply gap going forward. Jumping into where our project is, we're the Altar Copper Project. We're in the southwest corner of the province of San Juan. This is the border between Chile and Argentina. And we're one of 5 major copper projects that are right along the crest of the Andes on the Argentinian side. All of these projects have large resources already. In our case, we're about to make it quite a bit larger as we go forward. Quite frankly, all of these deposits would be mines if they were located 20 or 30 kilometers to the west in Chile instead of being in Argentina. So these have been frozen in time somewhat due to Argentina not having the fiscal policies that are conducive to development of large mines. That's a great opportunity right now for those of us that are exploring, that have our hands on projects there, and a tremendous opportunity for Argentina. This could make a very significant impact to recovering the economy in Argentina, which was very definitely necessary. Up here, I've pointed out that San Juan was recently named the top jurisdiction in all of Latin America for foreign mining investment. This is a survey called that the Fraser Institute puts out every year. It tends to note tendencies or improvements in areas, and that's why San Juan is being noted as this incredibly easy area for us to work, very welcome for us to work, much of the population wanting us to develop new projects. And just in the last 2 to 3 years, we've seen all of these major mining companies enter into the province of San Juan or elsewhere in Argentina. 5 years ago, we didn't see international companies particularly interested in Argentina, so it's quite a rush, if you will. This just refers to our strategy of how we go forward. So our companies that we run, what we do is we intentionally try to target projects that have that potential to be a very large copper or copper gold deposit. We work very much like Willem's Commodity Discoveries team is. That we're looking for a project that the discovery is just emerging. Why we're doing that is when I stepped out of a major mining company, we had to determine what type of an exploration company, what type of a junior we'd be. So you often focus on a certain commodity or a certain country. What we chose to do was to leverage off my experience of 20 or 30 years working in the Andes. Kevin Hedler, who's our Chief Geological Officer, has a similar amount of time. Kevin's more of a gold guy, I'm more of a copper guy. But between us, we knew how to work in these countries, and we knew about projects that were sitting out there that we felt had not received the attention necessary for them to go forward. So what we're trying to do is oftentimes identify a project that already has some historic drilling on it, something there. We're trying to acquire that project when the market's down, and then add value by expanding the resource, showing the full size of the deposit and de-risking it through about a pre-feasibility stage, and then preferably monetizing it by selling it to a major miner on that top of the first leg of the Lassonde-Brown curve that we talked about earlier today. And the reason we do that is it keeps us in the area that we work well. We're exploration geologists. You don't want me building a mine. And as a single asset company, I don't think as an investor you want to go through the time it takes for us to find one, show the full size, develop it. As we saw in the last talk from John, that's 30 years. So that's just not a good timeline for investors. So that's why we preferably do this. Aldebaran is the third company we've had in our same management team. Our first company, Antares Minerals, had the good fortune to identify the Jiquira project in southern Peru. We acquired it for $15 million from Phelps Dodge. The market thought we were crazy. We were a small cap company taking on an obligation to get a big project. We spent about $45 million Canadian to drill that project out, and we sold it for $650 million to First Quantum in 2010. So we have executed our plan once. It's not that simple. There were a few bumps up and down on the road, and a lot of learnings that came out of that. From that exercise, we spun out Regulus Resources. With Regulus, we're working on a really interesting discovery called Antiquary in northern Peru. We were happily moving this one along when the opportunity came out to put our hands on the Altar project, and the easiest way for us was to separate into two companies. So our same management team runs two companies in parallel, each of which has their hands on a big copper project right now. Our share structure is pretty simple. We have about 170 million shares outstanding, a market cap of about 170 million Canadian. Current cash position is pretty good cash position, although we're drilling heavily. We're just finishing our seasonal drill program. Keep in mind we're in South America, so the snow's starting to fly. We're just coming on the end of the season. We're earning into the project from Sibanye-Stillwater. They had this project, a platinum company with a large copper project. It didn't fit. We convinced that we'd be able to advance the project better than they can. So we'll have an 80% interest in the project by the end of this calendar year. We also have some other important strategic shareholders. South 32 owns about 15%. And a fund out of San Francisco called Route 1 Investment has 44% of the company. They put the initial funds up for us to acquire the project to move forward. And like us, they believe these projects are increasingly difficult to identify and capture. So the public float is relatively thin on this, which means we have a lot of leverage when we put out good drill results. This is our share price since COVID, so the last 4 years. And we've been fortunate that we've had a pretty steady increase. We've done successive financings from 30 cents to 45 cents to 78 cents, some warrant exercise to 93 cents, and we're currently trading a little over $1. So a pretty nice share price as we've begun to develop the full extent of this deposit. But we're about to make quite a shift in emphasis on the project. The project, when we acquired it, we knew it was already quite large. This is the resource that we put out in 2021. So between measured and indicated, we have about 1.2 billion tons, a little less than 0.5% copper. We also have about 0.2 billion tons of inferred resource, so quite well drilled on the upper portion of the deposit. And we'll see that results in a little over 13 billion pounds of copper and nearly 4 million ounces of gold simply as a byproduct. So this is already a very large deposit. We knew that when we acquired the project. That was the backbone of what we're doing. But what we were really excited about was the potential to reveal additional discoveries in the district. So over the last 2 years, we've been working on the Altar United. The deposit, as was known when we picked it up, was two zones, Altar Central and Altar East. Altar United, our geologists saw very good evidence that there was an additional zone between the two main zones. And over the last 2 years, we've demonstrated that was there, and it's come in much more strongly than we anticipated it would actually. When we take on a project like this, one of the first things we did, this project had 120,000 meters of drilling when we acquired the project, but it simply was grid drilling. There was very little systematic data collected on the project at all. One of the things we did was the first deep-looking IP survey, IP conductivity survey. And when we were doing this, we anticipated we would see these conductivity anomalies mapping out where mineralization went. We started with the two zones, this is central and this is east. Quite frankly, I thought we'd see tails of these and we'd be chasing higher grade zones at depth. But the anomaly came in as a big, consistent flying saucer type of anomaly here, indicating that between the two zones, we might have an additional zone. And over the last 2 years, we've been putting out some pretty spectacular results, including what Kai just mentioned is last week we put out 650 meters of 0.81% copper equivalent, dominantly copper. That's within a run of over 1,000 meters of 0.6%. And there are multiple holes. In this zone right through here, we've been drilling at a 200-meter spacing over the last 2 field seasons and filling this in so we'll be able to move this to a resource category by the end of this year. This is a timeline for information that'll be coming up. As I mentioned, we're just finishing our program right now. Snow's starting to fall. We're on our last drill hole for the campaign. We've finished 20,000 additional meters. So since our last resource, we've done 50,000 meters of drilling. We will use the information from this campaign to update our resource. So you'll see a new mineral resource late this year, about November of this year, and that will lead to us being able to put out the first PEA, or the first economic analysis of the project, in the first half of next year. That'll be a very fundamental milestone for the project moving forward. The drill holes are great, and we do get a positive response from the drill holes, but when you put out a new resource estimate, or particularly a PEA, then those are major steps in the project, and we're likely to see an important increase in valuation at those points in time. I wanted to also mention an important aspect of this project. I mentioned that we're partners with Sibanye-Stillwater because we're earning into the project with them. South 32 has been backing us, which is an endorsement of the project. It's been a way we've been able to fund projects in the past few years when it's been difficult to get additional funding in for this type of a project moving forward. We also have an agreement with Rio Tinto Newton. Rio Tinto Newton is a division of Rio Tinto that is exploring the possibility of being able to heap leach primary sulfides. Most big copper deposits require milling and concentration and sending a mineral concentrate to a smelter. That's a very capital-intensive process. It's why big copper projects cost so much to build and put forward. The upper portions or weathered portions of copper deposits can be processed by heap leach processing. Heap leach processing just produces copper metal directly on site. Rio Tinto, as many copper companies, has been investigating the possibility of modifying that heap leach technology to be able to apply it to the primary sulfides underneath. And they think they've cracked the nut on this. They're currently testing products or samples from our project at their cost to determine if their technology will work on this project. If it does work, it has potential tremendous benefits economically and also in the ESG sense on the project. It would lower our capital costs tremendously, very important also when you're in a project in the high Andes, but it also uses considerably less water, considerably less power, and it produces copper cathode on-site in-country, which is a value add for the country. So we don't need this technology to work for the project to be interesting, But if it does work, it turns a very good project into an excellent project. So we're very anxious to see the results of these later this year. Altar is already one of the largest deposits, undeveloped deposits in the hands of a junior mining company, therefore potentially acquirable by a major mining company. But I think when we put out the resource here at the end of this calendar year, you'll see us jump up this list quite notably. Very important to point out that with the rising copper prices, I believe we're already into an M&A situation in the copper space. But what it's been over the last 2 years is the major mining companies have been primarily acquiring other producing assets because they felt they've been cheap. And that's a very good strategy to move forward, but it doesn't result in new copper production. It just changes ownerships of the mines that are producing. As copper price takes off, we're already seeing the price of all copper companies move up notably. That will make these acquisitions of producing assets more costly and less attractive. And I anticipate within the next year, we'll see a switch to the majors looking increasingly at deposits like we have as potential projects that they can acquire to put into production. So I'm very pleased. We're on a great deposit. We've got an experienced team that's very good at doing this, but it's really important also that we're hitting the market right at the right timing. So just one closing shot of the project. It's a pretty spectacular part of the Andes. Even though this looks like we're very high up, Antofagasta has the operating Los Palambres mine 25 kilometers away from us at the same elevation. We see dust plumes from their blast when they're mining down there. So that's a quick snapshot. Please ask any questions at the booth, or there's a lot of information on our website as well. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Yep. Fantastic.